back.
Hi, we're back.
So excited to bring this guest on.
Yeah, I love it. I'm so excited for them to hear what she has to say. She's really, really powerful.
She is really incredible, really amazing. She's a dance instructor. She can do absolutely anything on your nails or her nails. Your nails will be done to the gods. She's so much fun to talk to. She sat down with us. Her book that she picked was A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. And it's just, we got to unpack that with her as a mental health professional, you know, her being a therapist and reading this book and kind of how she switched back and forth between therapist mode and between, you know, regular reader, just human absorbing the content. So that was a great perspective to bring to the table. She talks a lot about client-therapist boundaries and the importance of that. We discuss some of the controversial opinions of the author. We're so excited for you guys to hear this episode, and we're so excited to introduce you to Jasmine.
She is very warm. And like I told you the other day, I would tell her all my secrets immediately. And in someone that's like been to therapy and has had therapists in the past, you always, I think, are looking for someone that kind of has that inviting warmness to them. And I think that she brings that. And I think that that's something that people will pick up on when they listen.
Yeah. Love her so much. We just wanted to provide the disclaimer that Jasmine is not here giving mental health advice. She's not giving advice as, you know, in her therapist brain. This is more just Jasmine is just a girl.
She's just a girl.
We just want to make sure that we get that disclaimer across that this isn't mental health advice. This isn't like, you know, sitting down with a therapist and unpacking it in that super professional advice giving way, but more of just kind of what her thoughts were as she was reading and observing, you know, the feelings in her body and different things that were triggered. She is sharing personal opinions. So the opinions and discussion points in this episode are not Jasmine Rivera Wellness. They are Jasmine Rivera, just a girl.
Just a girl, yes. And I will say, moving into it, that this is not a book that you should just pick up and read if you're feeling like you're in the mood for a new novel. There are a lot of trigger warnings that come with it, and it is very graphic. It is very heavy. So I think that you need to be well aware of those before you read the book. So just be aware that some of those topics we're going to discuss as we move forward, into the section discussing the book.
Yeah. And, I think both of us have said it and Jasmine said it as well. This is a book that we probably could not responsibly recommend to someone. So it's a very sensationalized book on social media right now. And we want to kind of give people that warning because that's not in any of the sensationalized. It's just like, it's an emotional book that'll break your heart. Like, no, this is a very graphic depiction of pedophilia, sexual assault, rape, domestic violence, there are child abuse. There's a lot in here that is very, very graphic. And we just wanted to make sure that, full disclosure, I did not like the book and I would not recommend it to people. So
me neither.
I think that what the author was trying to accomplish, she could do in more responsible ways. And that's what I will leave it at until we get to the book portion. But this is not a book that I will be recommending to friends and family. If you liked the book, I fully respect that and your opinions. I just hated it.
So I hated the whole thing.
Just hated the book.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. And, we have some kind of back and forth dialogue in this episode too about the book. So
can't wait for you guys to hear. We are so excited to have you here, Jasmine. Thank you again, for, the book pick. Just for a reminder for listeners, this is our traditional format episode. So we will open the episode with some of the themes and topics that Jasmine has pulled from the book that she selected for us to read. And then for the second half, we'll go into the book.
The book that Jasmine selected was A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara.
So Jasmine is a licensed clinical professional counselor, and she has her own practice, actually. Exciting. That's new, Rivera Wellness. And this is, again, we're just focusing on Jasmine for this portion, so we're not focusing on the book or giving any spoilers. So stick around if you have not read the book, because this part will not touch it at all. But our first kind of question for you to explore is, how do you separate the therapist version of yourself from the version of yourself that your friends and family get, or just who you are in general, and whether or not you find that difficult?
I do like to think that they are similar. I'm not just like a brand new person when I step into my therapy office. But there is something about like, I'm not going to talk to you all and be like, well, where do you feel it in your body? Or we're just like not talking in that kind of way. So I always like to think of it as like an emotional boundary, that I'm not going in with the intention of unpacking and opening things up with you about, I don't know, if you tell me you have a hard day, I'm going to tell a friend or a loved one like, dude, that sucks.
Yeah.
Maybe I would also say that to a client, but we would get into, I don't know, just like a different kind of conversation. It's held differently. So I feel like there's a bit of a tightrope, I don't know, just for me. I feel like I walk on therapist versus myself, because again, they're quite similar girls. But I guess being a therapist over the last 5 years has taught me more so about the emotional boundary piece. Ultimately, therapist me is wanting so badly to fix or to help or to save people from their situations, and I know that's not even my job. That's I can't do that, which is sometimes sad, but I know that again, that's not my responsibility in the work. It is to help be the, I don't know, maybe a guide or help someone, because ultimately the client has all of the information and we work on opening and organizing and processing.
How much of that is your profession versus personality? You know what I mean? Like, you're like, I want to fix people and save them from themselves, and I feel like every single time my sister texts me, a friend texts me, my boyfriend, I'm like, I now need to be like your emotional vessel of information and truth. So like, how much is personal versus professional, do you feel?
I think at this point I do a good job of asking, do you want the therapist version or just me? Again, therapist me is just like taking it to a different level that I might not go to with a friend.
Well, and like professionally, this might be wrong, aren't you not allowed to like offer direct advice? Whereas like with a friend, you can be like, your man's a clown, your mom is wrong.
So like ultimately there's like the bias piece, because we go into the tea with like our friends in text or phone call or like whatever it is, and I'm like, oh, they suck, like get out of the situation. Mm-hmm. This is trash, you should be out of here. Mm-hmm. I'm not telling a client that.
Yeah.
Maybe every now and again I have like a really good rapport with a client and I can say like, girl, what are we talking, like what? What is happening here? But then I have just like these other tools, really.
And it's like professionalism, like at some level, just everywhere. You like, your work hat is on here versus when you're talking, and there's a different level of emotional investment when it's your friends and family versus a client.
Yeah,
that probably plays into it.
The emotional investment piece is always, to me, difficult as I get, I don't know if attached is the right word, but invested might be more appropriate, into their story and what they share with me, because I feel like that's a huge privilege. Where in my other relationships, I feel like that's just like what we do. Almost. Yeah. Maybe, I don't think it's an expectation, but that's just like what you do with your people. With a essential stranger coming in, and we already know what we're here to do. We're gonna unpack the stuff. That's a privilege. So I feel like I get to see into someone's brain and life, and we're really just strangers, like at the very beginning of this.
Yeah.
And from stranger turns into, you do your rapport building and you build this really lovely relationship that's full of like trust and respect. Respect is given definitely to the client for being able to do what they do. Now, me just being myself, I value that part of my relationships when people can tell me things, but there's no expectation for me to like do anything about it. We just get to talk. Almost like shooting the shit.
Yeah. Do you think it took a couple years of getting into your practice and having the experience in a clinical setting to get to that point? Or do you feel like you were able to kind of finish your schooling, go into this and know, okay, these are the boundaries I'm going to set and how I'm going to set them and what they are?
I think I had to learn how to set boundaries because I wanted to do like 1,000% and would feel incredibly depleted. So it's something that I talk about with my own therapist. Like, we cannot go beyond this emotional boundary wherever you put that for yourself, because then you're not like doing your best work. Like, I want to be there in the trenches with my clients for sure, and there has to be a level of like removing myself or distance in order to do that safely.
Yeah.
Do you think that your clients are aware of the boundaries that you have? I was going to ask if you communicated them or if they kind of came in and were listening to you per se.
I think I've had a couple, and these are learning for sure experiences, where I've had clients that want to come in and process really difficult experiences, and maybe I just know that I've not always been perfect is not a real thing, but I have not done the best, and they let me know, like, you did not hold me, like, that was not what I needed. That I had a client say, like, that was shit, like, how could you have done this? So I have to hear it. I'm not gonna blame a client like, you didn't do your job, or that's not what this is. It's I hear you and I'm sorry. What did you actually need? Like, just have to hear it. Sometimes I can't be exactly what they need.
Yeah.
And that's
like,
nobody's
not everything's
fault.
a fit.
Yeah.
Right.
That is harder to learn, that it's like not anybody's fault. Sometimes it just like doesn't match.
Yeah. Like, you're not, I mean, not everything is a fit. You're not always going to be like friends and you're just not always going to vibe with someone. Sometimes, like, there's not even a reason. You're just like, I don't really vibe with that person. And so, like, professionally, if you're trying to walk them through difficult things and you're like, the vibe is just off, like,
yeah,
it's not gonna, they're not gonna open up. You're not gonna be able to do your best work because you can sense that. And
It's tough, I get it, with like my clients at work. Sometimes when you create the boundary, you have clients that are, I'm sure, that are understanding of it or accepting of it, and then there are clients that do push back, and they let you know that they're pushing back against that. Have you ever dealt with anything like that?
Yes. They were trying to process something that was triggering to me as a woman, and I just realized, like, oh, my bias is all over the place here. So this client tells me in so many words that I'm the only person in their life that just like doesn't agree with them. So I let them know that is not my job. This relationship is not here for me to agree with you.
Yeah.
That's just like not what we do.
Right.
I also don't do that in my personal life. I'm not just going to agree with you just because you want me to.
yeah.
So it just turned into a formal close of session. I sent them an email like, hey, based on how things have been going, I just like will no longer. I don't think it's a good match for either of us.
Good for you. I think that's not only good for you, right? To say this isn't, we're not going to get anywhere past this, but for that former client can go find somebody else.
I hope I gave them like referrals. Like, I want to like wish you well, but it will not be able to happen here.
Well, that's okay. That happened. And, and like you said, not everybody's going to work out all the time. And I'm sure that that's like a blip in your practice, right? That it's probably
I feel like it doesn't
100%.
happen often.
Right.
Which
It's
is
like few and far between. And it feels heavy when you're emotionally invested, right? When you have like one, I don't want to say bad apple, but one experience that's not up to what your normal standard would be.
Yeah. I think even like having a bad session, I think any human, you don't have to be a therapist, to have like a crappy interaction with whoever it is and think like, oh, I'm the worst. Insert your role. But they do come far and few between, so I try not to focus too much on those.
Yeah, and I do have to wonder the level of self-awareness of someone who is like, everyone in my life agrees with me except you. Like, at what point, if everyone was agreeing with me all the time, I would not be like, wow, I am always right. I would be like,
I am a bitch.
Well, also, let's not forget that you went to school to do this. That if there's an expert in the room out of the two people there, it's you. Unless you're in your unique setting where like you're seeing a therapist because you're also a therapist, but I guess that's probably rare. But people come to you for advice and they should trust. I think, is it instinctually? Is that like when you first meet somebody? I'm trying to say that
I guess, but also like I'm not speaking about this specific client because I think they lack all kinds of self-awareness, but you're a stranger. I'm the expert on my life. Like,
Yes.
you're the expert on
I
their
tell
tongue
new clients
stuff,
that all
but
the
like,
time. I'm like, you are the expert on you, so you actually have to teach me a little bit before we can do anything.
mm-hmm. When clients come in and say or do things that you disagree with as a person, like to your core, or that trigger you heavily, how that impacts the work that you do, and if that is a decision in firing clients.
I try to take the opportunity to discuss that, because if there's one thing, is my face is gonna emote.
Yeah, like I don't have a poker face. You go.
No. I tried that in the very beginning, and then I feel like I'd be like nothing. So I know what my face looks like when I just experience life and people. That I would like to talk about it with them. Like, I had a strong reaction to what you said. I'm hoping that we can talk about it. Like, where were you at in this moment during the conversation? I don't know. I think it does something to the relationship, just to be honest. Not to say like, well, I don't agree with you, and I didn't like that you said this, but more of, again, I had this reaction. I noticed it. Checking in, did they notice it? Did they, like, I don't want someone to feel judged just because I don't have a poker face. That's, I think, an important relationship builder, because it's something that we have with our other relationships. We don't agree on everything, and we would still care about that person. But yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with that leading to firing a client. It has to be something a little more egregious for me to go and say, like, this is no longer working.
So, it's interesting you said earlier about how somebody's the expert of their own life. So the area of law that I practice in, filing the cases is really intricate, and it's different in the sense that you can't just walk into the circuit court for the state of Maryland and file a medical malpractice case. So a lot of times people get a little bit frustrated by that, and nobody really, I don't expect them to know coming into it what the procedure is. I get a lot of pushback when I don't get like an expert to support the case. That's what I have to move forward. And, I feel very confident and versed in this area in the law. It's all I've ever practiced in. And I don't brag about that, but I feel confident in relaying that information. And a lot of times people will push back at me, about the law generally, or how the medical procedures kind of work and that sort of thing. And when you deal with people that are emotional and they're going through a really hard time, that can be difficult. So I take each case personally. I've been able to dissociate where there's nothing I think that is in the materials that will trigger me, but I run into, like, quote, firing clients when they don't listen to our legal advice. Like, we once had a guy who just like kept contacting opposing counsel's office, and we had to be like, you can't do that. It's a given, and he wouldn't stop. Or you have, especially if there's maybe a situation where you have an 18-year-old person who's an adult who can participate in a case, and their parents are obviously trying to guide them, but they're not listening to what you're recommending. And, the parents aren't your client, the 18-year-old is.
Right.
So that's a tricky situation too. Normally, just with people who, even though they come to you for legal advice, don't like the advice they're told when it's, you can't file this right away, it's not going to get a trial date right away, it's kind of stuff like that. And they think, well, I'll go talk to another firm and then I'll get all that information in a much different way, and they don't. This is kind of a practice field where it's pretty consistent, it's always going to be the same.
That's difficult.
Oh, yeah.
Because, maybe there's ease in having everything being the same, but people always want what they want.
Yeah, and they're very, adamant about what they've been through and what's happened. And I always go into believing what someone has told me, and then it gets tricky if I read medical records and it's like completely different. And they go, well, why'd you turn my case down? And I have to go, well, none of this is in the records, and you may have refused X, Y, and Z. Then you kind of run into that scenario. But I have, like you, like this fine line you walk with. I don't want to be a robot when I get here, but I do want to maintain some sort of boundaries. So I try to like be myself, and I would talk to a client just like I'm talking to you guys right now. But I try to be as open as I can about the case. I think that as long as I communicate with them about what's going on and they're in the loop, they can't get upset about that, at least in that aspect. But it all depends. It's case by case, like
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Therapy to me is, yes, helping people, but it's more about building, again, this like very cool to me relationship. Again, I feel like it's privilege to be a therapist, to be let in to the story. And you have short-term clients, long-term clients, and I care about them in the same way. I don't know, just getting to have that relationship, connect with someone. Yes, there are boundaries which are there for safety, I think, ultimately.
Yeah.
But it's a unique relationship.
And like within your profession, you found what worked for you and like what answered that.
That was more like
your
fulfilled
purpose.
the purpose
Yeah.
than my initial interest, which was I had to pivot out of a physical therapy major. I realized that was just not going to work for me.
Yeah.
And obviously I had my dance major, but
I think that now that I've been in practice, can I go to trial? Yeah, absolutely. I am not like a person that craves to be in court. I think that's why I like my job so much, is because I'm not in court all the time. I can't imagine having to talk to a judge, the jury every day. Like that's just not, I'm happy that this allows me to have that in small doses. I think that I knew what to expect coming into it because I was a paralegal here before I was an attorney, and I got a lot of hands-on experience, but my perspective of it has changed now as a person that is married and has children and wants to have more children. I think that those are not things that I thought about at all beforehand. So there are certain cases that we have that bother me, like we have, birth injury cases, and that terrifies me. And the way that we treat our elderly in this country is just something that bothers me. But I knew, I think going into this job, the workload, I don't think and I hate to admit it because it sounds silly, I don't think I consider the workload on top of having a family and wanting more. And when I think about planning for the future, I go, well, I commute 2 hours a day, right? So if I'm commuting 2 hours a day and we want to have a family, that's 2 less hours with them. And then some days I'm here for 8, 9, 10, 11 hours, and other days I'm not. So I think that I'm so blessed for this opportunity, and I'm so lucky, and I'm grateful for my education. I just wish that I had maybe put a little more thought into, I don't want to say long term, but when we have a case that we get money for a client in, and I know that changes that person's life, that makes me so happy. And that's like a blip that will last me for like a long time, like years, right? That makes me feel really good. But then there's probably like 100 people in between that I can't help, and that's when it starts to really get to me. When you're like, I'm taking this personally and I want this to work and these people deserve it, that's when it starts to get a little hard. And you don't consider, I think you go into being a lawyer, you consider I'm gonna win, and you don't hear a lot of people talk about, the 20 losses they had leading up to it, which can make it a little bit intimidating too.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
We don't talk a lot about the sessions that are just, they feel like they just happened, and clients will say like, well, I didn't really get anywhere, but they still have the impact and they still do matter, I think, equally
Yeah.
to the wins or like the breakthroughs.
my last job was super close to trauma work, and it was the first time that in my professional career I had been close to trauma work. And I think it was a really good lesson because, you know, it really taught me that how much we absorb as people throughout the day, and like if I'm someone that can handle that. You know, I limited my social media use a little bit because just realizing the way that I absorb information and then like the way it bleeds out of me is not, I want to really be protecting that piece for myself and for all of the people that I have relationships with and interactions with, and for my child as well. I cannot compartmentalize. I can't leave work at work. I can't do that emotionally. And right now my child is at an age where, and I think he will always be at an age in my mind where it is imperative that I protect my mental health and that I show up at home in a way that I can give and receive love in a way that is not impacted by the things that I'm absorbing throughout the day. So that was why I had thought of that. Just when I think about you two at work, I'm like, whoa, I had to.
I remember you sharing about what you were feeling about just, like you said, like just hearing about things throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
And respectfully, that is like the most responsible thing that you could have done for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing that prepares you really to like hear trauma. Like it,
Yeah.
no amount of reading, no amount of school is, you're gonna be like, I got it.
What kind of impact hearing people unpack emotionally, what does that have on you? And I think it's different like when you're hearing it from friends and stuff, but as far as your like day to day in and out job, this is my purpose.
Over the years it's changed, and that's why I at times have questioned that magic word of like desensitized.
Yeah.
Just because I've heard a lot of things, and I've been a therapist just for 5 years, which doesn't seem like a long time, but I've heard things, and I can sit and listen, and sometimes I feel this like nothingness, like it's just like having a casual conversation, and I often worry about that, like, well, what does that mean? Why am I responding in this way? And I don't want to have this relationship with apathy, which is like lack of feeling. That to me is like scary to go on the whole other end and be almost numb to the stuff, which is what I call trauma in session. We'll call it the stuff.
The stuff.
People come in and they're like, oh, I got all this baggage. I'm like, wait. Like, let's be respectful here. It's just like the stuff. Like baggage has like this now like very negative connotation to it. But I don't know, it's, I think, form of protection for myself, because if I like again went through the trenches every single time, I think I would be losing bits of myself in every single session. Every single story would take and take. Just, it's not that I don't feel for my clients, and there are times, there's been a handful of sessions where I've like maybe cried in session just based really like their reaction to their own story. I find that painful. Yes, the story is painful, but seeing them, the energy shift in the room, it's witnessing. So witnessing is painful sometimes, for sure. So I think there's a bit of a default every now and again into a distance so I can protect myself.
Yeah.
Which is a weird balancing thing, because I have to also, and I want to also still be really present there, but I can't be crying in every session. I can't be like, ugh.
Right.
Now,
Look at what this is doing to me, your story. They're delivering it like cold cut clear, and you're like blubbering.
Like, and that's like something that we do. Like, I can deliver all of my stuff to my therapist because it's mine.
Yeah.
I've experienced it, and I know the story, and I'm going to say, and this happened, and then okay, and the end. And my therapist is like, oh, okay.
And it's like new to them, because I have a very, especially when I'm talking about like my own trauma or my own experiences, I have like a very cold, packaged, matter-of-fact delivery. Like it's like very emotionless when I'm talking about like the deepest, darkest things that you could uncover about me. But someone else talking about their stuff, I'm like, like, I guess because it's new info, and like, also, like you said, their reaction. If someone's crying, I couldn't even know what they're crying about, but if they're crying, I am crying. Like,
Yeah.
fully.
Can I ask you something a little sinister?
Yeah.
So when you wrote in your notes, you have a curiosity to know more sometimes.
Are you like, what are the screenshots? I would be like,
Are
what
there
did he
ever
do?
times where you're like, now let's back up a minute.
You're like, this is not for your professional notes. This is
Right.
for my own curiosity.
Okay. Yeah, I like unpack this one in therapy because I think it's our human condition to like look at
Yeah.
Agreed.
crisis.
Mm-hmm.
It's the whole concept of rubbernecking, right? Like we're like, oh my gosh, I can't stop looking at it.
Yeah.
And it makes, honestly, I feel like disrespectful because I don't think I'm conveying what I mean. I need more information or want more information. That's really what it is. Curiosity is a want for more. It like helps me process the story.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I had to do for my own, is know the ins and outs of the thing in order to process and begin to like move forward. I'm talking like and I guess this relates a little bit more to the book directly. Like I was like, I need to see what this looks like. I need to know. Maybe that'll help me understand. I don't know what. I think I'm going to understand more about the situation, but there is this strange want to have more information and look. Like if maybe I'm just a visual learner, but
No, I don't know what it is, because it's like with everything, right? Like that's why there are podcasts about books, about series. That's why there's fan films. That's why there are Reddit threads about some TikToker and what she's doing with her life and like her most recent divorce, is because people want to know more. And I love that you said want, because I think it's referred to as a need so often. And when you take a step back, you're like, whoa, I do not need to know this information. Like sometimes it's not healthy for my mental health to be like digging and digging. But yeah, I mean, that's why, like we've talked about, making fake Instagrams to look at other people. Like, what do I need to know what Sally Sweetheart's story is today? I don't. Like, that's the...
like sometimes I'm wanting to see what the person looks like that my client keeps, they come
talking
in session.
about. That's where
like,
I would not be
show
able to...
them to me.
Yes.
Show them to me. And I would...
Yeah.
On site.
On site.
I look people up constantly. They call for help, I'm looking them up. They tell me about a doctor, I'm looking them up. And then I'm looking up who they're married to, and I see where they vacation. And then I'm down a rabbit hole where I know where they go in their second home.
And then you like don't even end up taking them as a client.
I know,
You're like,
like,
oh, by the way,
oh,
I can't even take your case, but I do
sorry
know your
about that.
Instagram handle.
And it's interesting because I was kind of making notes about this the other day, where I think that both of us have jobs where our relationship with the client's based on trust. I cannot take a case if the person will not give me the full details. So it's very difficult because, like, trigger warning, I handle civil sex assault cases, so much different from the criminal aspect, but I have to kind of know these intimate details about somebody and then the worst moments of their life, because I need to know how to plead it in a way where we don't tell everybody their information and we tell just enough, walking a fine line with their privacy and these really delicate matters. And it's hard because if a defense attorney feels like this client isn't going to be forthcoming with the information, that's the first thing they're going to tell the jury. Well, this didn't happen. This person won't even say. So it's very hard, and I sometimes have to have that conversation with, I know that we don't really know each other, but I'm going to need you to tell me all of this. And I give people options, if you want to write it down, and then you can email it to me. You don't have to tell me on the phone. If there's, it's myself and then Mr. Dever, so he's a male. If somebody wants to talk to a man about what they've been through, they can do that too. But it's tricky because I don't get, like, months and months to establish this trust right away. We kind of have to jump right into, okay, I understand something traumatic happened. Now can you tell me everything that happened?
And sometimes I feel that's a known thing. Like, again, you know what you're coming into.
Right.
To a degree. But that's what I find to be really stressful, is when you're doing it, like, first appointment, tell me all this stuff. and we don't know each other.
Mm-hmm. It's a little awkward. You're kind of like, I'm nice and friendly and you can trust me. You know, you don't know me, but you can trust me.
So like those instances, that curiosity bit like is just like not there because it feels just like pressured in a not great way.
Yeah. First session as a client, when I was like in my later, 20s, 29, 30, it was very different than when I was like 22, 3 glasses of wine deep. I'll tell anybody anything.
I have no secrets.
Versus now, I'm like, why don't you tell me what you want to know to my therapist? And, at 22, I probably would have been like, where do you want me to start?
Yeah.
With like information that's not even relevant. I'm like, saw a dog today.
Yeah.
Versus, so I thought I was an oversharer, but turns out I was just young and full of alcohol.
Oh, I'm still an oversharer. To this day. I leave every social interaction. I'm like, why did I do that?
No, I'm selective oversharer. If I ever have one single shred of something that makes me feel comfortable, I'm like, okay, I'll tell you. But I'm very shy and like new, like sitting in a therapist's office, I'm like someone that you have to pull stuff out of. But like if I was allowed to have my sister like listening in through the window, you know how like at dance class, like you're
observing.
You could like if my sister could be there and was like thumbs upping me, then I would be like, okay, fine, you know what, we'll unpack it.
Yeah, I recall like one of the first times Derek and I were out in a social setting, he was like just kind of observing me at one point. He was like, do you realize like how much you share with people about your personal life? And he was like, I mean, like I don't care what you do, but it's also my personal life now. And I was like, okay, fair point.
Damn, Derek was probably like the company you keep when he met me, because literally I met him one time and I was like, fine, I will tell you.
When I'm around people that I like don't know, I'm like
so shy, so reserved.
I am such a reserved girl.
Oh,
and a people watcher forever until I know people, and then I'm like, okay, you want to do this thing, but otherwise I'm a tight-lipped.
By the time that you leave this building today, you will know at least 5 personal things about me.
That's great.
By the time you go, for sure.
That you didn't want to know.
Yeah, you're not gonna ask for it. I'm just gonna give it to you, which I think I do for many people I meet.
What is like a moment where you maybe left a social interaction or like an oversharing moment where you were like, why did I say that out loud?
The whole way home, you're like,
yeah. Can you think of an instance?
Oh my god.
Okay, the thing is, I'm trying to work on like not doing that, because I'm like, the people that I talk to generally like me at this point, so relax. But
I'm trying to think, because I get the feeling often. Maybe then I just push it out, whatever it was.
I can think of like
it was like a session, and I'm like, oh my, why did you say that?
Yeah.
Or why did you not say that? Because that would have been better.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, why did you do that? Like that wasn't even helpful. And then I'm like into the next session, I'm like, hey, just wanted to recap last week.
What did you think about that, and for how long did you think about that?
Did you think I was as bad as I thought?
How was my performance? What about you? You just said you could think of 2 right off the bat.
But they're so embarrassing, I don't think I could share them.
Come on,
like,
just do it.
Give us like the afterthought.
Yeah.
So, first of all...
No, give us the whole thing.
Okay, so one thing about me is that I am like nervous all the time. I'm like trying to work on my anxiety. It's not working. It's going nowhere. It's going nowhere fast. And I get so nervous on the phone at work with certain people, and I will just freeze. So I once was in a deposition. It was like my first one, and that's basically where you're not in front of a judge, but it's like court testimony on the record.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this is really the answer to the question, but not like an oversharing situation, but kind of, because I was on Zoom. It was like during COVID. And I just kind of at one point was like, not frozen. I just pretended. I was like, oh man, tough internet connection today. Like, in the middle of the deposition. And it's in the transcript.
That is so funny! You pretended to be frozen because you were so nervous in the middle of
And because she caught me off guard. And
That's
I've
like
never
a
done
refresh
on. That's what I did too. I was like, I just have to wait a minute. Because I didn't understand. So, like, you have to like, just do this to get it. And the witness was really uncooperative. She was not my client. She's not giving me any information. And why would she? She let a lady fall out of bed in a nursing home. So I'm like trying to get this information from her, and she's just not answering. And I didn't know that they just have to answer. So I'm like, oh, I'm frozen. I'm texting my boss. I'm like, what do I do? He's like, make her answer. I'm like, oh, I'm back.
You're like, I rebooted. Oh my god, that's so funny.
So how did you get in the car after that? Did you drive
So I remember I was like, okay, I think like I'm okay for right now, and I was gonna take a break, and my boss ran over to the conference room and he was like, take a break. I was like, I'll be right back. 1 moment, it's just 5 minutes and then we'll regroup.
You're like, I'm just gonna check my internet connection.
Yeah, 1 moment. So then my second deposition after that like went a lot better. I think it was just nerves, but my nerves make me short circuit. Like my body will get
I think that's quick thinking on your feet. I think that's such quick thinking to be like, you know what, I'm just gonna pretend like my system is down.
I went like this.
I pretend to
The
be
brain
frozen.
system was like, you're like, lag.
They're like, are you okay? You're like,
I'm like,
can you guys see me now?
I'm frozen. I can't.
I'm like, wow, these issues with technology. And it was so obvious there were not issues with technology.
Yeah, that's the best part. They're probably all like,
Oh, and can I tell you,
things
so
behind you are moving, like
I will
those
say,
trees.
It was difficult because I had been a paralegal and known of this defense attorney before. So the first thing she did when we got on Zoom, she was like, congratulations, I saw you're taking the deposition, that you've obviously passed the bar, that's amazing, that's exciting. I'm like, oh my gosh, women supporting women, that's amazing. That's amazing. Like, she's being so cool to me. We started getting into it, she's like, objection, objection, objection. I'm like, I don't know why she's objecting, what are you doing? So then she got to
We were friends.
Yeah, and she at one point, she was like, I don't do this often, but you know, I'm dangerously close to telling my witness not to answer the question. And I'm like, I don't know why you would do that. Like why?
We are friends. I passed the bar. You just said it.
And so she was so frustrated with me at the end of it, I could tell. But I'm like, you know what, lady? I'm a newbie. Here I am. I'm trying my darndest.
Supporting women. What happened to that message?
It left immediately. So then we had, there was a couple more depositions we did, and my boss did one later on. And he was like really hard on her in that one. I was like, thank you for avenging me. But I did. I fully pretended to be frozen. And it was obvious I wasn't.
I think I've had a client, I don't know what happened to me on my end. I clearly was rebooting, but they were like, are you frozen? And I was like,
No.
oh, I'm just being really still. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I've been there.
So then you panic and do you just like keep riding out the wave of like being frozen?
Or do you admit, like, I
I
was
just
not
left
here
the
for a
room.
moment. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. I'm
I
back
just
now.
left and I'm back.
Yeah.
You just disassociated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That happens to me
clients.
every time a judge talks to me. Like, I want people to know I'm competent, but if you want me to talk to a judge, I want you to know that I have napkins in my armpits.
Let me tell you that anytime you're like nervous, just call it out immediately. This is me just being myself, giving you that. I go
Okay.
on like first dates and I'm like, oh my god, I'm so nervous. And
Yeah.
they're like, oh my god, why? Or they're like, oh my gosh, me too.
Mhm.
Diffuse
Okay.
the whole thing
I'm
because
gonna do that.
you're nervous also about feeling nervous and
Yeah.
it's just like
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Today I had a hearing on Zoom. This is the last
I feel like
one.
maybe you shouldn't do it professionally.
hey, I'm really nervous.
Oh yeah, I'm a little nervous.
Guys, you look at your client right before going on. I am so nervous right now.
Full transparency.
You're like, you too, girl? And they're like, yeah, but you. What do you mean?
Or they might be like,
Fair, same.
Okay, so not professional advice.
Oh my gosh. Could you imagine?
Okay, so before we move into the books section, the third theme that was, the author has been very outspoken about this. It's very obvious in the novel that this is what she was going for. I believe she says it a few times. But she really wanted to drive home that sometimes people or clients of therapy do not get better. And with that being such an overarching theme in the book, and it's really evident in how the author writes the story, I wanted, again, without offering spoilers or discussing the book at all, I just wanted to hear and kind of discuss that
that idea with you.
I have some strong feelings on it that I've told Alex, but I'll let you take the floor first.
Okay. So the word better to me is difficult. I have people come in and say, my goal is to get better. And I'm like, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's this much information, like a tiny little box of what better means in my brain. It's, I don't know, it's limiting. So it is a fear of mine as a therapist that's real, that people sometimes just like don't progress, or sometimes they don't want to put the work in or can't put the work in or don't have access, and sometimes people just stay the same and do not get better.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever that really means, and that would be a conversation of opening up that definition, because I'm literally telling them like, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's
And
so
tell me more
broad.
information.
Yeah.
Brought up, yeah, fear and feeling like sad about that, like this powerlessness feeling that I wouldn't be able to do anything to maybe help a person. Or respectfully, sometimes people just like don't want the help and they don't want to get out of the situation, whatever that might be. That's a conversation I've had with clients in the past, and this is if I have the rapport to do so, which is very bluntly, like, you kind of sound like you like being here, like you're comfortable here, not like you like it, like yay, but we know what to expect in misery and being stuck, and there is an okayness with that. We don't know what it looks like outside of there. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to interact with the world outside of this little box. That's when I start to take it like personally, which I shouldn't, but it just like happens. I feel like I'm not doing enough. So I guess it goes back into other things that we talked about today in terms of boundaries, that it's not my job to like convince someone into changing or like investing in whatever their work might be, and sometimes it is that we just like don't progress.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
And remaining comfortable somewhere, like, I mean, you do know because you're their therapist, but as far as looking in on your friends' lives and like other loved ones in your life, like, you don't know what that coping mechanism is doing for them in that moment, and like that might be where they need to be at. Like right now they need maybe just to stay comfortable, like maybe the fear of the unknown or the potential of growth, like that might, you can't push someone out of something that they're not ready for. And so while we can't, see into our loved ones' lives and the reasons that they're using certain coping mechanisms or certain, like, they learned that somewhere as a survival mechanism or as a protective measure, at some point something happened to them that is how they operate. And like, we just don't always know, unless they're sitting with a professional and ready to start taking that step. I mean, it's difficult to watch someone repeat the same patterns, but you also don't know what they're kind of doing for them in that moment. So
I'm often curious about the function of the coping skill or defense mechanism, because I've been having conversations about self-abandonment a lot, maybe for myself, maybe for other clients. That is a coping skill, believe it or not. And it's this like big ugly thing that in my mind, this is solely for me, I feel anytime I've self-abandoned is like I literally like toss myself down a flight of stairs. Like, I know that's not what I want to do, I need something different, and I just like literally reckless abandon, tossed. And it's scary, but it has a purpose. It served me at some point. So getting curious about, like you were saying, it protected the person at some point in time. We don't always get to do that in our personal relationships.
yeah,
Like, where did you learn that?
yeah, which is why it's such a privilege for you to like.
And maybe we could ask our people that. Like, I don't know how that would go over. If I'm like, well, why did you? I don't know. The questions are like, when was the first time you had to do that, or like, who showed you how to do that? Who told you about this? Where did you see that?
Yeah, you have to start to kind of.
Because it's never to judge. I don't care what it is that you're
Mhm.
doing to help yourself. It was truly helping you and protecting you.
Right.
You did the best that you could.
Okay, so now we're going to officially be starting the book. The book, A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. So that is the book that we read, that Jasmine brought to the table, and really, you know, Jasmine and I were talking about it on the way over. It's so viral. It's so sensationalized. Like, as far as why did you pick it? I think we even made the comment we probably would not recommend this to family and friends, or like,
Yeah.
I could
anyone
never
else.
responsibly say like,
No.
yes, pick this book up.
You
yeah.
Good luck, God bless.
Have fun
Like,
with all 800
am I
pages.
glad I read it? I don't think so.
Right. Same.
Yeah, I like couldn't even like. I have a hard time capturing like a review.
Yeah.
I gave it a 5
Mhm.
because of the impact. Great writing, content, rough. But I would say it's like I don't know. Can I say it's a good book?
I like can recognize that her writing is good. I think she made a lot of irresponsible choices.
So, you can call me Kendrick Lamar because I am the biggest hater. I am drama right now. 'Cause I
You drama.
didn't love it. Do we want to kind of do our little summary? We normally give a little summary about the book.
Okay, so the book is about 4 male friends living
Yeah.
in New York, and I think the progression of their lives with each other, they're very intermingled. You know, you have the themes of friendship, of their like successful careers, addiction's a theme in there. Trauma is a huge note throughout the entire book.
And
So like young college into like
They're
their like
50s.
50s.
Yeah.
Right.
So you see a big chunk of their life.
And there's one character that's focused on, once you get into like past the introduction of the book, we focus on our character Jude,
Yes.
who is kind of at issue throughout the novel. But like you said, it's kind of like a walkthrough of different parts of his life and then different parts of the friend
It
group
seems
in
like
their life.
everyone moves like this around him throughout the entire book, because he's always at the center.
Yeah, and I think
In
that
literally everything, he's at the center.
yeah, I think he's like the main character, which is interesting because in the beginning he's so glossed over. It's like, oh, and also Jude, oh, and also Jude. And then he emerges as like the main character in the novel. But one of the things, you know, going into our topics and our themes and our points, I thought about you when I was reading, because I was like, man, if you're reading this as a therapist, and like how, if you were able to, like, how did you read that? And we were texting at one point and you were saying that some of it you were like desensitized to, and I think maybe like your therapist brain had turned on and you were desensitized at that point in the book, and then other times it was super heavy. So
So if I were to like show the whole copy of all my annotations, I see where I was like working, because I would identify like, oh my gosh, this is the beginning stages of grooming, or this is, you know, whatever insert clinical jargon is used in my own writing. And I was like, wow, this is what's happening. And I think that was a lot of protection, because me just reading this as just a girl, the first part of the book where they start to open up about traumatic experiences for Jude, honestly, I was like, oh, okay, like,
this is
really
the trauma.
sad, like this is what everyone's talking about in the book, and like really upsetting. And I'm comparing again my emotional reaction or response to that of people on the internet, which whatever, but I was questioning. I was like, am I okay? Because it's not like it was some cute little content. It was really painful to read. It was scary, but I am always questioning, like, are you good? Like, you read that whole thing and just continued like it was nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It was just another story that I read. Now, as the book progressed, I did find myself like truly like scared of what I was reading. There's very depictions of
A lot. It's all very graphic.
graphic depictions of domestic violence, of sexual abuse. That's like childhood throughout adulthood. That were horrifying, and I was sobbing over the book because I couldn't wrap my mind around like why this was happening.
Cue my issue with the author enters. I think, early on in reading this book, I saw an interview of hers, because I'm a spoiler queen. I don't like to not know what's going to happen. So I absorb it. I listen to it all the whole time anyways. But I saw this interview where she said that the character of Jude came to her fully formed. That she did no further research, she just knew and would now write. It's irresponsible to do no research in the character that you're writing about when you do not identify in any way with that character. And especially then, I'm thinking of that interview when I'm reading these incredibly graphic content, like for what? There is no, like you just took pen to paper and wanted to create this scenario. You're not writing a memoir right now. Like I really struggle with the way that she wrote this, knowing that she openly admits how little research she did.
And she like dies on that hill. She's
Yeah.
like, let me triple down for you on that, which is a little. It's just interesting.
And because then I don't know what like the purpose is.
I think
Exactly.
the purpose was to write a book that was sad. And I think I told you both earlier in the interview where she talks about the title of the book. She says, well, it's called A Little Life because life is short and it's unhappy and it's sad and then you die. And I'm like, that's such a... I have seen a lot of people refer to this book as like trauma porn, and I would agree because it just felt like she was like, what can I write in this book that is messed up and sad and unhappy? And I can also admit I'm a little biased and like I don't like to leave a book feeling that way. It takes a lot for me to not be able to tolerate something in a book, and I read some weird stuff. Okay, I read a lot of weird things. But there are like parts of this book that I could not stomach. Like I didn't understand the choice to go into such graphic detail about pedophilia and sexual assault and sexual abuse and rape and assault generally. Like I just didn't understand that generally, in a general sense.
So we were talking about that earlier today, like what is the point? And the only thing that I can really like wrap my head around here is to provoke a feeling in a reader.
That's fair.
Not that this is like a good or a bad thing, but noticing my own reaction to what I was reading, like my heart was like pounding and I was feeling anxious and I was obviously crying and feeling heartbroken and frustrated and all of these different things. Does that like pair with what Jude was maybe feeling, or like terror throughout the book? Feeling truly terrified of something or grossed out by something, or I don't know, I felt like it was to provoke.
Yeah, and when you had put it that way earlier, I had thought that was really profound, and I can visualize that as a purpose for the writing as far as like feeling exactly what the main character is feeling in that moment. That's an interesting approach to take in not just like leaving you with an emotion, but rather being like, this is what they were feeling right now. This is what they were. So like when you had said that earlier, I gave it a little grace because I was like, okay, that I can see.
Okay, fine.
Grace goes like a little bit because I think the part of Axiom of Equality, which that was the chapter that I think just like ruined my life, and that sounds whatever, but
I will not be the same after that chapter.
I was very much so distraught. After the assault happened with Caleb, my notes on that whole part were all over the place, but there's a part at the end where he talks about like my beautiful apartment, and having that like safety and security and just, you know, the things that my loved ones gave me to fill my beautiful apartment was painful.
Yeah.
So like, is that maybe what was happening for him as well? Really vulnerable, and having your comfort taken away from you, that was not your choice. Not that that makes any kind of provoking of my emotions like good on the on the writer, but yeah, that was like the first moment that I was like, maybe like this, or maybe that's just because I connected to that.
Yeah.
If anyone knows what it's like to have their like safety like taken away.
Yeah.
I also think that, you know, I can recognize that I'm a happy endings reader always. So I knew that I wasn't going to like the book because that's just not the nature of what I like to read. I read to escape reality and trauma and so this, I was like, whoa. But I also would love to discuss and hear everyone's thoughts on, I don't understand seeking this genre out and wanting to read in graphic detail these situations and finding enjoyment in them, and especially with understanding my own history with, obviously knowing my own history with sexual trauma and reading these, it like makes me squirm that someone else is like enjoying reading something that is a very real thing, and that really like some things a lot, like many other people, altered my life forever, how I view relationships, how I interact with people, how I, so the fact that someone is like sitting and writing this, like and then going on book tours admitting that she has like no clue what she's, like that she just like wanted to do it, and that there are people that just like seek this kind of stuff out. I am really struggling with that. Like I'm really struggling with someone wanting to sit and consume this kind of media. This is like very real for a lot of people, and then like reading it in this graphic detail, I think makes it intrusive and inappropriate, like for people who like, why do you want to or like enjoy reading it? So I don't know where that was going, but that was just like, I had a visceral reaction to like thinking about other people actively seeking out this kind of genre in a book.
No, I agree with you. I think that goes back to the people's curiosity to know about scary stories. It's our obsession with like and knowing stuff. It's our obsession with true crime. We'll just like want to know, and I don't know what it is, because now I know we can deviate into humans that like seek this out in like a gross way. Like I need to, like I want to know this, and I don't. That was judgy. I'm sorry, but there are people who just like seek this out because they take pleasure in it for whatever reason, and that's gross. And scary. Those are the scary people, and I think others. I started to look at like, why did people pick the book up? Because I was just an innocent bystander to TikTok and was like, sure, like I would like, right. And some people in there are saying like, I wanted to read this because I wanted to feel something. If you need to read this in order to feel something, I think we need to have a different conversation, because that's rough. If you're, again, and that would align with provoking emotion out of people by reading really heavy content. That doesn't like make it any better though.
Well, and like I guess I'm just consistent in that way too, because I have the same feelings on true crime. Like that's somebody's, there's one, when you're like listening to it and spreading awareness responsibly, and the family is all on board and they know, and it's to like further awareness or like I get it. But when you are just going on a true crime binge, obsessed with that kind of content and creating it and doing this with no regard to the family, no regard to anyone involved, I think that you need to look at yourself and your true crime obsession and America's obsession with true crime. I think you really need to make sure you're consuming it in an ethical way. This is a soapbox that I will step off in just a minute, but it's the same thing with like the book. I think that if you need to really explore why this is your need, and like there's a very different need when you're needing to know all of the details in some woman in Nebraska's gruesome murder versus when you need to know who your ex-boyfriend is dating next. Like I think that is two very different things. So
Yeah.
what was your feelings on his friends and his friends' level of intervention and how that is different as, I don't know if you want to speak to that on a therapist or like as someone with friends or like what?
I thought that the support system was like so there. Like they almost like wanted, well, not JB. JB was an asshat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why did I have to read a whole background about him for him to just be a jerk?
I was so disappointed. I was like, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But isn't that like the reality of our relationships? We like build these very intimate, close relationships, and people still just are themselves, and they disappoint us and they hurt us and they hurt our feelings.
Having a close relationship with someone that struggles with addiction also.
Yeah.
Like that is a very selfish disease where you're in it for yourself to your core, like in some ways, and
like maybe they could have like shifted spotlight to him for a little bit longer to understand him better prior to him royally fucking up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, what? I didn't,
Yeah.
I don't know. I just like need to know, again, I just like need to know more about the person. I want to know more about the person because I was like, you're a dick.
I
But
think
then
it
I'm
would have
like-
been a responsible choice to look further into why his addiction would play into his actions.
Yes.
I think that would be a great, that would have been awesome to
We
have.
needed a little bit of relief from Jude.
Yes.
Please look at somebody else.
Yeah, please look at somebody else and why they do what they do.
Very
Because,
valid
yeah.
issues were happening for
Yeah.
him as well.
Mhm.
But otherwise, I thought that the support was so there. If anything, I feel like they were begging to help.
How did you confront the different emotions that you came up while you were reading? Like you had mentioned, that sometimes you were making notes from, a clinical diagnosis perspective. Sometimes you were really feeling and dealing with the emotions. But one of the things that you had mentioned was that reading this really triggered your worldview.
Yeah, so my worldview is that generally all people are good or have capacity to do good, and this was so off.
Yeah.
I was in this like disbelief of like, how is this possible? But I do have that script in my mind in sessions with clients, depending on what we're talking about. Like, how is this possible that like you experience this? Like, how is it possible that someone did this? Why would someone do this? Again, tying in my curiosity to have more information, does that help answer that question any better? No. I will never get an answer to how someone could how people can act in these ways. I will never have a good answer.
Can I also just say, like, I don't think Willem was a good character. And
Oh,
I think
T.
I think that he's depicted as a good character. I kind of disagree with how some of his friends handled how, I don't know the right term, whether it's his mental health crisis and what was happening, but for example, like Willem knows things. He doesn't know the details, but he knows that something is not right. And by the time that they enter this romantic relationship with one another and they're having sex and he's, finally become, after years he's aware that, Jude is completely traumatized and triggered every time it happens. Like, how do you not know? And I think that he's kind of painted in this light where, like, he was the closest one and he kind of knew best. But why is it that JB had a whole intervention when he started doing meth? And, Malcolm's like, Willem, can you, like, talk to Jude? Maybe, like, you should talk to Jude. Like, you talk to him. It just didn't feel like, I think that a lot of people did step up and were trying to do what they can, especially, like you said, with a person who's not being forthcoming. I just didn't love the way that I felt like Willem was trying to, like, be portrayed in this light of, like, helpful, and there were a lot of things I think that he did when you kind of back up maybe that you look where you're like, this was also harmful to Jude, even though you didn't mean for it to be. Like, the lack of awareness is what made it problematic for him.
The enabling.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And it just kind of, I think that it just was a little frustrating in that aspect, because you're like, even the good people like aren't even being like that as good as they could be.
Yeah,
Obviously
that
not even-
relationship was sad to see it so stuck, because they recognized that they had things to work on, and they kind of like, that got redundant, and I think that was the point, was to be like, okay, we are gonna do this better, and then circle back, and then circle, and they still, I thought that was,
comfort wheel.
Yeah.
I thought that was so realistic, yeah, unfortunately, that like,
But I
that
felt
pattern
relieved when
that
they
got stuck
finally
in.
decided to commit to one another. I felt such a relief.
Yeah.
I was like, finally.
Mhm.
I've been waiting for it since like page 200 for
Yeah.
you to be in a relationship with one another.
The intimacy piece was so sad too, because when you've suffered sexual trauma like that, and then you have a healthy love and a healthy relationship.
And you like want, so that was like something like my own personal notes of like the relearning or
Yeah.
unlearning
Yeah.
is, I think, well, yeah, it has the potential to like re-traumatize a person, but it was painful to read,
Yeah.
because he like genuinely could not do it
Yeah.
safely, yet wanted to for his partner. Is that codependence? Was this a codependent? No, like in general, was this a codependent relationship?
I don't think that I can confidently answer that question because of the level of trauma present that was like impacting the relationship. I think codependency would have been like the most normal issue that could have been present in a relationship. Yeah. But like, I think the relationship was unhealthy, but I don't necessarily think it was the people in it. I think it was how heavily impacted they were by their trauma and that sphere, and like that's, I mean, I guess that's the people that's in it, but I, like when you're in an abusive dynamic or a toxic dynamic, one person is like taking actions that are like actively abusive, actively toxic. I don't think that was what was happening here, so that's why when I say unhealthy, I don't want it to get like grouped into that thing. I think it was like unhealthy beyond their control at the time for where they were, and which made it all the more sad. He wanted to get there and like he just couldn't, like because
that
of his experience.
lasted for such. We talked about like how long did it really need to go on.
Yeah.
That portion lasted for such a long time.
I
I don't know at what point you can.
Yeah.
I don't know at what point like you condense it, but I was like, okay, I understand.
Like
I get it. I get it. I hear. I see it. I'm hearing it.
And that kind of leads right in to your third point. Well, the third point that we talked about earlier, you know, which is this view that the author brings in that some people just can't get better, you know, and where she was coming from with that. Because in my opinion, there was really like no plot here. There's no, you know, and I understand like the overall plot, but there was not this character development with Jude, in my opinion. Like it stayed very, very stagnant the whole time, which is why it's so difficult to read. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, if you thought that there was any kind of progression, whether it was good or bad.
So that is, it was frustrating, but that goes maybe even back to, I don't know if I mentioned this at all earlier, the concept of better or maybe expectations that I have, that I want to see a character arc, that I want to see a happy ending.
Yeah.
I wanted him to, well, on top of me thinking about like what would I even say to him as his therapist.
Yeah, like did you go there? Like as
Yeah,
far
so I
as
was
like what would I
Hey,
do
like what's going on? Like where do you want to start today?
with this stuff?
I would
Yeah.
So yeah, I did not know where to begin. Yeah, we want to see people get better. We want to see improvement. We want to see a happy ending. We want to see, or like redemption. We want to see something. which, I don't know, also had me thinking about the unlikable female characters. I think it spoke very loudly about women that we want to see progression for them. So we can place that here for a man. So it's intentionally that way because it is frustrating to see no progression and to see it's like flatlined the whole book. It's the same.
Yeah.
And there were parts of there were like several quotes of him speaking like, well, I just like don't think happiness is for me, like I don't think this is for me, it's like for everybody else. So this shame then like emerged in my brain, and that's like what I think about the entire book for Jude. That's where he is. And we know that that's, well, actually I don't know, I can't say we, I know that that is a big feature of someone who has experienced trauma in their life, is shame is pervasive. It's it goes into everything. It seeps into everything and like calcifies in there if it's not talked about. It's just left in the dark. And like you can't always like get out of that. So that's like his very chronic like undeservingness the entire time.
Yeah.
His like belief to his core that he is undeserving of good things.
Every single time, that is where he was at. And there were points that I would get, again, frustrated because it was almost like he kind of said like, well, like maybe this time it would be okay. Maybe this person is like for real with me. But then it would like suck him back in.
Yeah.
So when you say that shame, I thought that was interesting. It's not about the book, but what that shame is something that, you know, kind of spreads like a virus and just calcifies and everything. What are some of the ways that that shows up in people's behavior? Maybe actions, or maybe like your own self-thoughts. Like what are ways that we can check ourselves?
So I think a lot like about unresolved trauma and how that lives in our bodies with these different reactions that we might not understand. It might be something as what we might think is like harmless as like jumping to conclusions. Could be a thing, but a lot of our like negative belief systems about ourselves, how like our body exists in space, and when we're like activated, be it like that's like tension or basically activating your like stress response. All with this note of shame is like I'm wrong, I'm bad, not this bad thing happened to me or I experienced this thing. It's taking on all of that responsibility and blame. That's not yours. In like everything that you do.
Things that I liked about the book, I did like seeing male friendships and the like that genuine, just unconditional returning back to each other, the support system when it was that, you know, like I thought seeing that was a good read, and I enjoyed reading about that, and I probably would seek more books out about male friendship, and maybe like without the trauma dump, but like definitely with male friendship as a centered theme was something that I really enjoyed reading. I really liked it.
And something that I don't think I've read a lot about.
Same.
We get to talk about how like lovely it is to have our female friendships and how sacred they are. And I think in this world, we talk about female friendships and then male friendships are depicted as being something really like cheap and like surface level, but that just like was not here in this book. So I thought it was lovely, and I was like, I needed more of that to soften like the whole scary bit. I needed a bit more like nurturing, I think.
Yeah, and like his friends and how they were, I like wonder, I know that when they were sharing secrets with themselves or with each other, Jude was nervous to do so because of his own past, but I, you know, seeing their dynamic and seeing these men and how much they wanted, well, except JB, but like, and how much they wanted to like be there and help, I wished and had hoped and wondered how the book would have turned out had Jude opened up to his friends earlier, because of the receptive nature that I saw in these male friendships and like their unconditional love, and the fact that they wanted to like be there and support. I'm like, man, I bet it would have gone.
I like was like this. I'm like, please just like do it for like one person and like see what it feels. But I feel like that's also me as a therapist. I'm like, literally tell me like one thing and like let's just like see what happens.
Yeah.
Like, is the earth going to shatter because you start to tell the story and because you share space with a person?
Yeah.
It feels like that.
Yeah.
To share and to go into really intimate details.
Because you can't unshare. You can't swallow it. Yeah.
But it was like pretty early on in the book that I was like, oh, I know where this is going.
Oh,
I like ultimately knew that was going to happen.
Yeah.
I like can imagine that they would have been like, finally, like we're here, and not this like other script that he had in his mind, that it would have been like, I will lose my power, I'm going to be weak, I'm gonna, they're gonna feel sorry for me.
Yeah, they're gonna have to tiptoe around me, which is so crazy because that's what was actually happening. Like right now, they're tiptoeing around you because you're not sharing. Right now,
and they're like picking up on. Clearly, these men were like energy feeling. Like, we know you're not okay.
Yeah.
But you're not telling us what's wrong. You're not telling us anything. So they're guessing, and we're making these assumptions that never help when we assume.
All right.
I would say, like, if you were going to pick this up, I would strongly assess, like, where you're at in your life, emotionally as well. I thought that I was a good candidate to read the book, that I would be fine, and found myself, I don't know, I felt like kind of destroyed reading this book. It was just very much so upsetting. So be gentle with yourself if you decide to read it. It's a lot. It took me months to read. And I took breaks, which maybe was a good decision. But yeah, ultimately, be gentle with yourself.
Yeah. My advice would be, if you're thinking of reading this book, don't.
Yeah.
For all of those reasons, though. Like, I don't even know that anyone is emotionally ready to read some of that graphic content. And so, yeah, like Jasmine said, take breaks, check in if you're.
And you need to be prepared for a dense read. Like, you can't go into this like, oh, I'm going to read 15 pages before bed when you're sleepy, because it's going to be confusing and difficult to understand. You really need to be in like a focus.
Thank you so much for tuning into Her Best Interest. You can find all of Jasmine Rivera's contact information in our show notes. We are happy to share that. She is so wonderful. As always, we release episodes every other Wednesday. So you can find us all over. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on TikTok. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on YouTube, and you can find us on our website and also Spotify.
Thank you guys for listening. And then not next week, but the following, we will release another open book episode. So that's our new concept that we've brought to the platform. The second episode of each month will be an open book featuring the person as the story and the storyteller. And you do not need a book there is no required read ahead of time for those formats, because the person that we sit down with is the story start to finish. So we will have an open book episode as our next episode. There is no reading homework.
Perfect.
Thank you guys.
Bye.